The actual power of one General Grievous is a hot subject of debate, mostly because of the inconsistency that were shown to him throughout all of the lore. In some instances, Grievous is an unstoppable Jedi butcher, while in others, he is a cowardly slimeball that runs at every single chance he gets. While his reputation as a Jedi killer precedes him often enough, the droid general has been perceived as being far weaker in canon than he originally was portrayed, especially in his Legends debut in the continuity beginning with his first appearance in the 2003 Clone Wars cartoon. Since then, the massive separation between the two iterations of Grievous have brought many to argue which is the true version. But for today, my friends, I bring excellent news. The events that made General Grievous famous in Legends have now been canonized, as the Marvel Obi-Wan series, The Battle of Hypori, has been officially brought to canon. So since Legends and canon Grievous are now essentially the same, one question remains. Why does Grievous seem to grow more and more ineffective as the Clone Wars progressed? What's the difference between his Legends, or should we say former self, and his canon, or latter self? Well, today, we are going to do a comparison of his ability across the timetable of the Clone Wars, and explain why in continuity he grew weaker and his power dropped off. When comparing direct abilities, there is almost no argument to be made. The former version of Grievous or Legends was far superior in just about every way, but that is not to say later Grievous had nothing to offer either. He was cunning, cruel, and very skilled with the lightsaber, but there is a noticeable difference with Legends and canon, especially in how they move. For starters, the Grievous of old was extremely fast, able to frustrate the reaction speeds of even the most talented Jedi. The speed of Force sensitives is absolutely nothing to underplay, as they have proven to be able to move incomprehensibly fast. There have been many accounts of people claiming to have witnessed Jedi moving faster than the human eye could perceive, being still one moment and pushing into action the next. When two masters of the lightsaber engage, it is said that their duels are blurs of color and flashing light. Yet, Grievous, lacking in the Force but upgraded with cybernetics, is able to not only keep up with Jedi, but even catch them off guard. While both versions of Grievous technically can keep up with Jedi, it's clear that there's definitely a visual distinction with Legends. He was able to move fast enough to avoid a Force blast from Ki-Adi Mundi, bypass the defenses of Tar Sayer, and grabbing a Jedi's head with his foot, dodge volleys of blaster bolts and missiles, and fight off 4 Jedi Masters at the same time. Important to note, he only had 2 lightsabers. In the Legends Revenge of the Sith novelization, this is how Grievous's speed is described. The electro drivers that powered Grievous's limbs could move them faster than the human eye could see. When he swung his arm, it and his fist and the lightsaber within it would literally vanish, wiped from existence by sheer mind-numbing speed, an imitation quantum event. No human being could move remotely as fast as General Grievous. When it comes to the speed exhibited by canon Grievous, we have to remember that these feats of speed reaction time can also be applied to him mostly. Although it isn't often shown visually, canon Grievous still has the capability to catch a Jedi and keep up with one, though it's mostly through his cunning and guile that he will outwit or outmaneuver his Jedi enemies. During the Battle of Utapau, Grievous was still able to move his arms fast enough to put Obi-Wan on the back foot. And of course, he was able to backhand the Jedi Master several times during their skirmish on the landing platform, and throughout the Clone Wars, he was able to pull off several maneuvers that slipped the attention of his Jedi opponents, at least until it was too late. But that is speed. What about raw strength? Surprisingly, canon Grievous is superior in this way. Both versions are incredibly strong, as they are able to lift and hurl multiple humanoids with ease. Both depictions have been able to easily crush metals and machinery, whether by smashing battle droids, electronic consoles, or dent the hulls of ships. However, in canon, Grievous gives us an impressive display of what his body is capable of. During the Son of Dathomir comic, Grievous smashes and crushes Beskar helmets and the armor of the Mandalorian Death Watch. This feat is thought to be basically impossible, and not even the Dark Troopers were able to punch through Beskar. Rather, when Din Djarin was having his head pummeled by the Dark Trooper, the reinforced Durasteel hull gave way sooner than his helmet did. Yet, Grievous was shown to be able to utterly smash several helmets. Whether or not this is full Beskar is unknown, but even if it isn't, this feat is nigh inconceivable. In terms of his battle IQ and overall intelligence, Legends General Grievous comes out on top, and not by a small amount either. Legends Grievous just seems to use his robotic body more to his advantage. He utilizes his ability to spin his torso 360, becoming a whirling cyclone of blades during the Battle of Hypori, and in the Battle of Coruscant, he resists the powerful force bellow of the Jedi Roron by clinging to the ground and retracting himself within his own armor. Legends Grievous also appears to have better planning, and to plan things far in advance rather than making rash decisions out of anger. Legends Grievous is far more aware of his surroundings, and recovers from being caught off guard much quicker. Once Canon Grievous is outwitted, he usually attempts to flee. Admittedly though, Canon Grievous is shown to be formidable as a tactician in his own right. The droid general displays a great deal of competency when leading an army or a navy, even though in close quarters combat he mainly relies on his physical advantage. While he's certainly no Grand Admiral Thrawn, Grievous was able to outsmart the Jedi and Maul several times. We also can't forget that it was Grievous who wiped out all of the Night Sisters on Dathomir. But having said all of that, Canon Grievous is infamous for his cowardice and how often he flees battle, in stark contrast to the unstoppable monster that he is in Legends. So with these comparisons now laid out, we need to answer the question: if both these Grievouses are the same, why did he get weaker as the Clone Wars progressed? The theory we propose today is that he didn't get weaker, it's just that everyone else became more experienced. When Grievous first made his bombastic entrance, he did so preying on a group of weakened and cornered Jedi, causing his reputation to become one of horror that he left behind. Nothing like General Grievous had ever been seen before. It was thought impossible that a machine could keep up with a legendary Jedi, yet Grievous did. And he didn't just keep up with Jedi, he murdered them. The terror he inspired, along with all of his tricks and his arsenal, kept the Jedi guessing. They never knew what to expect from him, and the uncertainty that Grievous posed unbalanced them, literally made their connection to the Force strained because of their fear and not understanding what he was. Grievous's strategy was facing Jedi and deny them their greatest advantage, that being peace. If a Jedi is not at peace, then the Force is not with them, and they are much more easily defeated. To quote Dooku, "If you are to succeed, you must have fear, surprise, and intimidation on your side, for if any one of these elements are lacking, it would be wise for you to retreat." Sidious even heard this and approved of this advice immediately following. He clearly knew the limitations that Grievous had as a warrior against the Jedi. Grievous followed this advice to a T, and he was extremely good at it. He was strong against all the Jedi that feared him because they struggled to connect to the Force. In Hypori, Grievous had never been seen before, the likes of which had never been seen before at all. A cyborg that could compete with the Force sensitive was thought to be impossible, and Grievous was feared far more towards the beginning of the war than at the end. Towards the end, Grievous faced many Jedi over and over again, specifically Kenobi. Master Kenobi was one of the first Jedi who didn't show any fear to Grievous. Obi-Wan was at peace and survived many interactions with him, eventually being chosen by the Council specifically to assassinate the droid general. Beyond Kenobi, Grievous was facing higher tier Jedi on the regular. In the canon comics and in the Clone Wars series, there are no mid-tier Jedi that even hold a candle to Grievous. Ahsoka managed to survive once long enough to escape, and that was with the help of experienced clones. But when higher tier Jedi confront him, and we aren't talking about regular masters, we are talking about the greatest of the Jedi Council. Many say it was confusing that Grievous was able to moonwalk 2 members of the High Council, but then later got his metal fed back to him by Kit Fisto. The Battle of Hypori is most often put in contrast with the Battle of Grievous's lair on Vesic, and it is because Hypori was the general at his absolute strongest, and Vesic was him at his weakest. Let's take a look at both of these instances and discuss what happened. The Battle of Hypori had many factors in Grievous's favor, most importantly, the state of the 5 Jedi that he confronted. As we mentioned earlier, they were all weakened. Ki-Adi-Mundi, Aayla Secura, Shaak Ti, Tar Seir, Kakruk, and Shah-Gi were all cornered in a wrecked Venator. Based on the transmission Obi-Wan received from their location, they explicitly stated that all of their numbers had been defeated, and that they required immediate evacuation. The Jedi are exhausted, and they have been fighting for quite a long time, an unspecified amount of time in fact. Their previous army was completely compromised, and they were surrounded by B2 super battle droids. Grievous had decided to make the entire assault consist of the B2 battle droids. His own power, compared to the higher functioning droids, was to send them a clear message: to crush Jedi forces. The Jedi were weak and tired to begin with. Then, they were afraid. They had seen the general able to best several Jedi compatriots, and they knew he was powerful. But then, Grievous methodically puts on a theatrical show, intimidating them further. By using sounds and stalking them, he struck fear into the Jedi, making them paranoid. He could be anywhere. He forced them to group up in a circle before he launched at them. Grievous himself doesn't get tired, and he was practically at his very peak. This was the very first time any of them had seen Grievous. They knew that he had struck down Jedi, but they didn't actually know what he looked like. They couldn't anticipate his moves or his power. Meanwhile, they were sluggish, they were fatigued, and they were filled with fear. To summarize, Grievous had every advantage: fear, surprise, intimidation, and to top it all off, superior stamina. But how does this Grievous compare to the fight that he had on Vesic? He was the one that was weakened, backed into a corner, and yet he still managed to come out on top. After killing most of the clones present with Fisto and Nadar Veb, Grievous engaged the overly ambitious Nadar, killing him with an underhanded tactic. Since Nadar was not afraid of Grievous, the Force was his ally, but he did not sense Grievous's blaster before it was too late. But when Grievous faced Kit Fisto, he would learn quickly what it meant to face a member of the Jedi Council on equal footing. Fisto was full of energy and resolve. He was fearless as Kenobi had been, and filled with indignation after seeing his former Padawan die. Fisto was a master of Form 1 Shi-Cho, a form which is characterized by wide sweeping motions of the blade. Shi-Cho happens to excel at facing multiple opponents, which made it perfectly suited for fighting against all of Grievous's lightsabers. His 4 arms, what one might think as a disadvantage at first, was a clear advantage for Fisto. He managed to disorient the droid general and maneuver his way around him seamlessly. And then of course, Fisto had the Force on his side and managed to even push the droid general over. So now you see the clear difference between Hypori and Vesic. The Jedi of Hypori were trying to fight Grievous on his terms. They did not coordinate with each other or try to pick on his weaknesses. They didn't know them. They were afraid, allowing their belief that he was unstoppable to pry into their very minds. They were unable to mount an appropriate defense. They were tired, too tired to test the limits of his abilities, and they failed. But when he fought a Jedi Master who was at the top of his game, Grievous was put down, and put down swiftly. Let's not forget that many times Canon Grievous faced other powerful Jedi and quickly came out on top. Most of the times he fought Obi-Wan, he had a technical victory, but there was a deleted cutscene from the original Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 7, one that showed Grievous winning a duel with Obi-Wan with an absolute victory. As skilled as Kenobi was, it still took him a while to get used to the tricks of the droid general, and if he had actually managed to defeat Obi-Wan, and if that was included, this would be one of his greatest feats by far. But it was mostly in between some of these later fights that the Jedi began to share information about him. The general found himself having to retreat more and more. The Jedi knew and understood who he was, and they would not scare like they did at first. This absolutely had an impact on Grievous, and actually did not serve to his advantage at all mentally. He became rash, more and more eager to prove his superiority to the Jedi. Rather than more cunning actions, he would expose himself. His strategies became overwhelming the Jedi with his own skill and his massive numbers. But this left him vulnerable, and his reputation was tarnished by the Jedi as the time went on. Simply put, Grievous was getting sloppy. Dooku was breathing down his neck and threatening to replace him at every turn. And it makes sense why Grievous's actual skill actually tanked while his desperation increased massively. And this, my friends, is why we believe Legends and Canon Grievous could be the same person, and his massive skill at the beginning of the war compared to the end could make sense, as ironically, fear, being the greatest weapon in Grievous's arsenal, also turned into his greatest weakness. Anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the evolution of General Grievous? Thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today, and may the Force be with you.